Have you ever sat in a crowded room and felt like you were in some kind of simulation? Quick greetings, half smiles, eyes that look at each other but don't really see. You nod politely. You respond with socially acceptable warmth, but somewhere in your mind you know something feels off. I'm not talking about paranoia. I'm not suggesting you become a skeptic who questions everyone around you. I'm simply asking, have you ever felt that the person in front of you isn't really present? That behind their polished appearance, something is being hidden? That their harmless words carry unspoken agendas? That there are people you can't quite label as fake, but you also can't trust them as genuine? If you've ever felt that way, it's not because you're paranoid. It's not because you're overly sensitive. It might simply be that you've begun to see what others don't say, to hear what others are trying to hide, to sense those tiny gaps between what's said and what's meant, and that is the sign of someone beginning to awaken. The ancients called it the wisdom of silent observation. Stoics call it the art of discernment. A true Stoic doesn't need to be clever in every situation. They just need to be still enough to see clearly without being pulled in. To see people not just through what they say, but through what they leave unsaid. No need to scrutinize, no need to conclude, just to see clearly and completely. I remember a meeting once where everyone showed up on time, smiled on cue, spoke politely. On paper, it was the definition of professionalism, but for some reason, I felt a tightness in the room, like someone was acting, and the rest was silently playing along to make it look real. So I began to observe, not their eyes, but their feet, not their words, but their silences, not their faces, but the subtle changes in their tone. And slowly, I began to understand. Someone was smiling, but their hands were clenched under the table. Another nodded, but their shoulders tensed. Each time the word responsibility came up, one person stayed silent through most of the meeting, but suddenly delivered the final decision with the most assertive voice, and I asked myself, how much of what we believe is real is simply the result of not being quiet enough to see through it? Stoicism doesn't teach you to be a body language expert. It doesn't encourage you to mistrust everyone. It simply reminds you of one quiet truth: don't let appearances cloud your clarity. You don't need to look at people with suspicion. You only need to see them with eyes that aren't manipulated, not by emotion, not by personal feelings, not by the expectation that people should be like this or that person would never do that. The world doesn't run on your expectations, and people are not as consistent as they pretend to be. Everyone has a part of themselves they show to the world, and another part they hide, even from themselves. The Stoic doesn't chase absolute truth in others. They seek steadiness in how they respond to the complexities of human nature. So then, how do you know who's real and who's wearing a mask? How do you read someone without them even knowing you're observing? How do you enter a conversation not just with your ears, but with a deeper kind of awareness? That's what we'll dive into in this video, not through psychology hacks, not with tricks to read body language like some seminar course, but through 6 subtle inner signals, the smallest of things that simply can't be faked. Because no matter how much someone tries to hide, truth always leaks out in moments when they're not on guard. When they think they're in control, that's often when they reveal the deepest part of themselves. You just have to know how to observe and remain still inside. Don't expect this to turn you into someone who can read everyone. That's not what Stoicism is about. The goal isn't to control others. It's to help you see who truly deserves your trust. And more than that, to help you live more honestly with yourself. Because once you start seeing what others are trying to hide, you'll also begin to see where you've been pretending with yourself. Once you learn to observe others without attachment, You'll also learn to observe your own emotions without being swallowed by them, and that is the real gift of becoming awake. Now, if you're ready, let's step into the very first sign. 3 words that can make anyone reveal who they really are without realizing it. No manipulation, no pressure. Just one question asked at the right moment, in the right way, and you'll begin to see what they've never shared with anyone. Let me show you in the next part. One of the hardest skills in communication isn't saying the right thing. It's knowing when to stay silent, and not everyone knows this. But there's a simple way to get someone to say things they never planned to reveal. Just 3 words. Tell me more. 3 gentle words, not confrontational, not interrogating, but unexpectedly powerful. I remember once debating with an old friend. It wasn't even a big topic, just that eternal question: should pineapple belong on pizza? I was ready, as usual, to counter every argument with logic, but for some reason that day, I didn't push back. I looked at him, smiled lightly, and said, "Tell me more. Why don't you like it?" What happened next surprised me. He started talking about family dinners, memories of a father who always forced the whole family to eat whatever he liked, meals that lacked laughter but were full of unspoken rules, and how a single slice of pineapple on a pizza became a symbol of control. It wasn't about pizza anymore. It was about emotions left unprocessed, wounds left unspoken, now hiding beneath a casual disagreement. I started using this technique in other situations. In a tense negotiation, I didn't argue. I simply said, "Tell me more." A friend who was angry, instead of defending myself, I asked, "Can you help me understand?" Even when a stranger was rambling, I didn't interrupt. I nodded and let them keep talking. And every time, the result was the same. People said more than they planned to, and the more they spoke, the more their truth surfaced, not because you forced them to, but because you created just enough space for them to feel safe enough to open up. Stoicism teaches us strength isn't in talking well, it's in listening without judgment. Tell me more is not a tactic, it's a posture, a way of showing up without rushing to insert your opinion, without needing to win, just being there, like a still mirror, so the other person can finally see themselves clearly. Have you ever noticed when someone feels they're not being resisted, they stop defending? And when they stop defending, they reveal more honestly, more vulnerably, and yes, often, without meaning to. They expose their weaknesses, not because you're clever, but because you're calm enough not to interrupt. Once, he sat in a contract negotiation. The other party walked in, sharp, concise, in full control. Instead of questioning them right away, I simply paused and said, "I'd like to understand. Could you tell me more about why the deadline is so urgent?" No pressure, no push, just calm curiosity. And he started talking. First, about internal timelines. Then the pressure from upper management. Then financial constraints. And finally, he slipped and said, "Honestly, if we don't close this deal this week, my boss will cut our team's entire quarterly bonus." We didn't need to investigate. He handed us his leverage, simply because he was listened to long enough. You see, in a world where everyone fights to be heard, the one who truly listens becomes the most powerful. Not to manipulate, but to see people for who they are and decide whether to stay in the conversation or walk away. Stoicism doesn't teach you to take advantage of people. It teaches you to stay aware enough not to get pulled into their game. Tell me more is your way of stepping out of the chess match they're trying to play. No arguing, no interrupting, just stepping back and letting them make their own moves. And while they're caught up, arranging their pieces, you've already seen the strategy. They didn't mean to reveal. And strangely enough, the more deeply you listen, the clearer their real voice becomes. Not the voice they want you to hear, but the one they've been trying to suppress for years, a trembling voice. When they mention their father, a subtle frown. When someone praises them too much, eyes that drop. When they talk about a failure, all of it surfaces. When you're silent enough to receive it. So ask yourself, have you ever created a space safe enough for someone to speak their truth? Do you truly listen? Or are you just waiting for your turn to speak? Have you ever missed the chance to see someone clearly simply because you rushed to prove your point? And deeper still, have you created that same space for yourself? Have you told your truth when no one's asking? Or are you living in a role so long that you've forgotten who you really are? Tell me more is not just for others. It's an invitation to listen inward, to hear the things you've avoided, the memories you've buried, the fears that still whisper every time you pretend everything's fine. So next time you stand before someone and want to see them clearly, don't push, don't judge. Just be still enough to say the words and observe. Tell me more. And you may be surprised, not just by what they reveal, but by who you start becoming. Someone who no longer lives only by what they hear, but by what they perceive, with presence. We'll continue in the next part with one of the clearest signals to tell whether someone is truly kind or just performing kindness. There's a very simple way to know if someone is truly kind. You don't need to check their education. You don't even need to pay attention to how they treat you. And you definitely don't need to hear them talk about ethics or morality. Just observe one thing. How do they treat the people they consider beneath them? In society, everyone learns how to be socially appropriate. We know how to smile when meeting someone important. We know how to behave politely around a boss. We know how to speak sweetly when we want something, but that doesn't say much. Kindness isn't something that switches on under the spotlight. Kindness is what stays when no one's watching. I once worked with a man who was incredibly charming in meetings. In the boardroom, he could lift the atmosphere in seconds, always said the right things, knew how to compliment, how to engage. Everyone liked him, until one day we all went out for lunch together. Within minutes, I saw a completely different version of him. The waiter arrived. He didn't even look up, gave orders like he was commanding a servant. No thanks, no eye contact. Even made a sarcastic remark when the food was late. I sat there, speechless, not because I was shocked, but because I realized I had trusted a version of him that wasn't real. Stoicism teaches us, a person's true character doesn't appear in rituals, it appears in their habits. And the most telling habit, how they treat people they have no need to impress. A truly kind person makes no distinction between the waiter and the CEO, not because everyone is equal in power, but because no one deserves to be disrespected. They don't need someone to react in order to offer kindness. They don't need someone to be important in order to show respect. If you want to know someone's character, don't watch them when they're trying to impress. Watch them when they think no one's watching. Watch them when they're rushed, when they're being inconvenienced, when they've been placed in a position of authority. That's when people act without filters, because they think no one cares. And that's when the truth slips out. A Stoic learns to read character not through words, but through subtle layers of behavior. You don't need to ask someone, "Are you a kind person?" Just quietly observe how they speak to the security guard, talk to a street vendor, say thanks or not to someone who serves them water. These aren't small details. They're footprints of a person's character. You can apply this principle to every kind of relationship. In love, don't just notice how they treat you when things are good. Listen to how they talk about their ex. Do they still show respect, even though the relationship has ended? Or do they turn that person into a punchline for casual stories? In work, don't just judge a colleague by how they interact with your boss. Watch how they treat the intern. Do they talk down to newcomers? Do they set others up to fail? Quietly. Why does Stoicism care about this? Because genuine kindness doesn't come from wanting to look good. It comes from an inner steadiness. The more stable a person is in their values, the less they feel the need to decide who deserves respect. They respect because it's right, not because the other person is worth it. As for those who fake kindness, they're not being kind. They're calculating. They choose who to be kind to. They choose the moments to look polite. They choose the audience before putting on their good person act. And people like that, they're not terrifying because they're bad. They're terrifying because they're good at hiding it. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be suspicious, but it does protect you from being blind. It teaches you not to fall for outer polish, not to comfort yourself with, as long as they're good to me, it's fine, because one day you might no longer be someone they need to impress, and when that day comes, you'll meet a different version of them. The version they save for people who are no longer useful. A truly kind person doesn't have multiple versions. Whether they're with someone in power or someone struggling, they treat both with quiet dignity. Whether they're winning or losing, they stay inwardly composed. You don't need someone who smiles all the time. You need someone who doesn't change their face when you're no longer useful to them. If there's one lesson I've learned from years of observing people, it's this. The way someone treats the weaker ones is the way they'll treat you when you lose your strength. Today, you might be a guest. Tomorrow, you might be the one knocking for help. Today, you might be valued. Tomorrow, you might be left out. If you're in a relationship right now and want to know if it's real or not, try putting yourself in a slightly lower position than them, even just for one situation, and observe. You'll understand more than their words will ever reveal. Let me ask you, who are you kind to? Only the people you admire, or everyone? Can you maintain respect even when the other person doesn't deserve it? Because the one who stays kind, even when they don't have to, that's the kind of person worth learning from, and the kind of person worth walking this life with. We'll continue in the next part. How to understand someone's present behavior. By the past they've never spoken of, there's something most people won't admit. We don't act based on the present. We act based on how we were wounded in the past. Meaning, when someone reacts in a strange, disproportionate, or confusing way, chances are they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to someone who once hurt them. Stoicism teaches us to see people as they are, not as we wish they were, not as we fear they might be, and definitely not through our assumptions. But to do that, you have to learn to look through the present, all the way to the root. And that root is usually found in the past, not the past they've shared with you, but the past they've hidden, sometimes even from themselves. I had a friend who was always on guard. Every conversation felt tense. He constantly questioned people's motives, assumed there was always a hidden agenda. At first, I found him difficult to be around, until I discovered something. He had once been betrayed by the very person he trusted most, a brother, in every sense of the word, who used his unconditional trust to deceive him. Since then, he lived like a soldier in a war zone, always on high alert, never letting anyone get too close, and if necessary, he'd shoot first, just to avoid being hurt again. See, if you only looked at his present behavior, you'd see someone irritable, closed off, easily triggered. But if you looked deeper, you'd see a man who's lived too long in pain, someone who never got a chance to live in peace. A person who's been humiliated will overreact to even the softest critique. A person who's been abandoned will panic every time you go silent. A person who's been controlled will resist even the gentlest check-in. They're not living with logic. They're living with survival instincts, born from a past that never let go. And the strange part, they don't even realize it. Because the past doesn't die. It just shapeshifts into reflexes, repeating themselves, until someone patient enough decides to really see them. Stoicism doesn't give you an excuse to forgive everything blindly, but it does help you understand not every behavior comes from malice. Sometimes it comes from a wound. And once you truly understand that, you can stop being hurt by them. Stop reacting out of your own reflex, and stop trying to carry a relationship that's too heavy. We're not here to psychoanalyze people. We're here to figure out where we stand in relation to them. You don't have to rescue anyone from their past. You just need to recognize the patterns and ask yourself, am I becoming the next victim in a story that isn't mine? Am I trying too hard to prove I'm not like the one who hurt them? Am I sacrificing my peace just to heal a wound that I didn't cause? The observation Stoicism teaches isn't about judging others. It's about protecting your energy, about knowing where to place your trust. Someone might be a good person, but if they haven't realized they're being driven by old wounds, they can still hurt you, even without meaning to. I once loved someone who was incredibly attentive. She always cared, checked in, took note of every little detail. But if I forgot to text for a few hours, she'd go silent, grow suspicious, and assume I was falling out of love. I tried everything to reassure her, to be perfect, to prove I was reliable, until he realized I hadn't done anything wrong. She was just reliving an old chapter, a time when she had been betrayed. And the hard truth is, you can't save someone from their past if they're not ready to look back. Stoicism taught me to stop, not to respond emotionally, not to blame her, not to blame myself either, just to see it as it is and to accept the deeper truth. Some people aren't ready to love. If fear still speaks louder than trust inside them, if you're in a relationship right now and the other person is constantly overreacting to small things, pause, observe. Ask yourself, are they reacting to you or to a ghost from their past? And are you willing to walk beside them on that journey of healing? Not everyone deserves blame, but not everyone deserves to go with you either. And the truth is, you have the right to decide who gets to step into your present after you've left your past. One last, and perhaps the deepest question, have you healed your own past? Or are you still living through the responses of someone who was once abandoned? Are you letting an old wound write the script of your new life? Are you acting like someone who's aware, or just someone who's gotten used to pain? Are you building walls for people who never hurt you? If so, this is the time to look at it clearly, not to blame yourself, just to understand and to move forward. Because once you see how the past is running the present, you'll stop being anyone's victim, and you'll stop hurting others out of wounds you haven't yet healed. In the next part, we'll look at a subtle but powerful sign, how someone's tone of voice reveals more than they ever meant to share. Have you ever felt like someone's words made sense, but something still felt off? Not the content, not the logic, but the voice. There's something most people never notice. We can control our words, but it's much harder to control our tone when we're not telling the truth. Stoicism teaches us to see life beyond the surface, to watch the movement of someone's essence, and often that essence begins to show in the voice. You can say, "I'm fine," with confidence, but if your voice drops, if there's a pause mid-sentence, if your eyes drift away while you say it, you're not fine. Words can be rehearsed, but tone is the body's unconscious honesty. I once had a colleague who was famous for his smooth talk. He could win over clients in minutes. But one day, during a team meeting, I asked him a simple question: "Have you finished the report?" He smiled casually and answered quickly, "Yeah, it's all good," but something was off. His tone dropped. His pace sped up slightly, and he ended the sentence with a small cough. I couldn't point to a specific lie, but I knew something wasn't real. A few days later, the truth came out. He hadn't finished it. He was just afraid to take responsibility. What stuck with me wasn't the lie. It was this realization: the body always reveals what the mind tries to hide. Tone is a mirror that doesn't know how to cover up. When someone's uncertain, their voice trembles. When someone's hiding something, their speech feels strained. When someone fears being caught, they speed up or slow down unnaturally. You don't need to study interrogation techniques. You just need to be silent and fully present. Stoicism doesn't teach suspicion. It teaches observation without attachment. Sometimes you don't need to argue. You don't need to accuse. Just take note. This person's tone doesn't match their words. And from there, you know not to place blind trust in the story. A friend once told me about his new relationship. Everything sounded ideal. He said she was kind, intelligent, gentle, but every time he spoke of the future, marriage, living together, building a life, his voice softened. The certainty faded. I asked, "Are you sure you want a future with her?" He smiled and said, "Of course." But again, his voice dropped, just slightly. Months later, they broke up. The reason? She wasn't honest with him. And deep down, he had never been sure. He had known from the beginning, but he couldn't bring himself to admit it. You see, the voice reveals truths people don't even know about themselves. So, if you want to read someone, don't just listen to the answer. Listen to how they answer. Do they hesitate? Do they repeat a word too many times? Do they laugh to fill the silence? Do they speed up when the topic gets serious? Do they say something but can't keep a steady breath while saying it? These are all signals, not to accuse, but to decide. Should you trust or take a step back? A Stoic never rushes. They don't react to every word. They pause, they observe, and they only act when they've seen what lies beneath the surface, because tone is the whisper of truth. You can apply this in your daily life. When someone says, "I'm fine," but their tone drags like it's gasping for air. When someone says, "I trust you," but they can't meet your eyes. When someone says, "It's nothing," but their smile feels forced. In those moments, you don't need to respond. You just need to stop lying to yourself. You don't always need to expose someone. Sometimes, you just need to stop being lulled by a voice that's hiding something, because awareness doesn't demand action. It simply keeps you from placing blind trust in something that's already showing cracks. And the question is not just about others, but about yourself too. Have you ever said something that even your own voice didn't believe? Have you ever smiled to comfort someone while inside you were falling apart? Have you ever said, "I'm okay," but your throat tightened with words left unsaid? Your voice doesn't lie, and if you're quiet enough, you'll hear what your heart has been trying to tell you. And once you hear yourself clearly, you'll begin to hear others on a level you never could before. Next, we'll explore something even deeper than tone, a person's attitude when they think no one is watching. If you want to know who someone really is, don't watch how they act in a crowd. Watch how they behave when they think no one is watching. Because the spotlight makes people adjust. But when the lights go off, that's when the mask slips. Stoicism teaches us something essential. True character needs no audience. Real virtue doesn't wait for applause. A person can be kind, warm, and thoughtful when there are eyes on them. But if you want to see their nature, quietly observe them. In moments no one notices. I once worked under a manager who was the definition of professionalism. Every time the higher-ups were present, she was graceful, polite, and inspiring. But once the meeting doors closed, her tone changed. Cold, sharp, disrespectful. She'd lash out at subordinates for small mistakes. Not to correct them, just to vent. At first, I wondered which one was the real her. And then I understood. People show you who they really are when they don't think they have to play a role. This principle applies everywhere. In romantic relationships, pay attention to how someone treats you after the newness fades. When there's no longer a need to impress, not chase, no show. Do they still keep the small promises? Do they still speak kindly, even when they're upset? Do they treat you differently when no one else is around? In friendships, don't just listen to compliments in public. Watch. Do they speak well of you when you're not there? Do they defend you against gossip? Or are they only kind when you're doing something for them? Most people don't lie out of malice. Sometimes, they're just used to living two versions of themselves. One for the world to see, and one just to get through life. And when that duality continues long enough, they forget which one is real. That's why Stoics don't trust first impressions. They don't rush to believe early behavior. They observe patiently. They wait until the person feels safe enough to drop the performance. One day, I visited a friend at home. He was always polite, calm, and soft-spoken in public. But that day, after dinner, his mother asked him to clear the dishes. He snapped, "I'm tired. Do it yourself." It happened fast. No one said anything, but I remembered not to judge. But because I saw, that was the moment he didn't feel the need to perform anymore. Those who truly live with virtue, they hold to their values. Even when no one is watching, they don't need praise. They don't need eyes on them. They don't need recognition. They are kind because it's right, not because someone's looking. Stoicism doesn't teach us to hunt for people's faults. It invites us to observe with calm clarity, to observe so we know who we're walking with, and to remind ourselves, am I living with the same integrity when no one sees me? You can use this principle as a compass. If someone only acts right when important people are around, they're performing. If they treat you differently once you're no longer useful, they were never sincere. If they're warm in public, but distant when it's just the two of you, they're not kind, they're calculating. Those who are genuinely good stay consistent, wherever they are, with whomever they're with, no matter what time, mood, or circumstance. You can meet them on a bad day, and they still won't insult others. You can see them disappointed, and they won't lash out unfairly. You can watch them fail, and they'll still respond with honesty and grace. Because for them, kindness doesn't depend on outside eyes. It depends on the eyes of conscience, watching from within. There's a Stoic saying, "I carry with me." True virtue needs no recognition. When you do what's right, you don't need anyone to see. When you do what's wrong, the absence of witnesses doesn't make it right. And that's why, when you watch someone, while they believe no one is watching, you're seeing the rawest part of their character. So here's the question for you. Are you consistent? in both the light and the shadows. Do you act the same, whether observed or alone? Or are you also living two versions of yourself, only bringing out the good one when needed? No one's perfect, but everyone can be honest. And honesty isn't about saying everything. It's about not pretending to be what you're not. Up next, we'll explore something that cannot be faked: emotion. Because wherever your emotions rise the strongest, that's where your deepest values are hiding. Have you ever met someone who's usually calm, polite, and composed, but then one small comment, one mild suggestion, and they suddenly lose control? A brief look of confusion, a furrowed brow, a sharp, impatient interruption. In that moment, emotion rises like a thin trail of smoke, and in that same moment, you see the truth beneath the surface. Stoicism teaches us, emotions are not the enemy. Being ruled by emotions is, but if you're mindful enough to observe someone's emotional responses, you'll start to read the map of their inner priorities. Someone may say, "I don't care about money," but mention an unclear financial detail, and their voice rises. Their eyes narrow. You realize money matters to them. Someone may say, "I don't need recognition," but the moment someone else gets praise, they go silent. Their mood shifts. That's your clue. Validation is what they're starving for. Emotions mirror the values that get touched. The stronger the emotional reaction, the more important the underlying value. People who explode when doubted may carry scars from past betrayal. People hurt by small remarks may have grown up feeling unseen. Those hypersensitive to criticism were likely raised in constant judgment. Stoicism doesn't teach us to judge people based on emotion. It teaches us to use emotion as a lens to see the root of behavior, not to excuse everything. But to understand this, you're not always talking to the adult in front of you. Sometimes, you're talking to a wounded child. They haven't healed yet. I once had a friend, strong, independent, decisive, always the one taking charge, never hesitating. But one day, we were chatting about family, and I casually asked, "Do you still keep in touch with your parents?" His hand froze on the coffee cup. He shrugged, said nothing, and quickly changed the subject. Just a few seconds, but something inside him had clearly been touched. Later, I found out he grew up with an alcoholic, abusive father. All his strength was just armor, built to protect the child that once felt powerless. You see, emotions are natural, and if you observe with calm awareness, you'll start to sense what someone carries, even when their words reveal nothing. Stoicism doesn't ask you to chase people's emotions. You don't need to always soothe them. You don't need to blame yourself if they lash out, withdraw, or shut down. You simply ask yourself, where is this emotion coming from? What is it protecting inside them? And is it part of a deeper pattern they're not even aware of? Some people get defensive every time they're given feedback, not because you're wrong, but because they were never taught through kindness. To them, any suggestion feels like an attack. Some panic when you go silent, not because you're cold, but because silence reminds them of abandonment. Someone once left them without a word. So here's the real question. Are you becoming a victim of someone else's unresolved emotions? Are you constantly explaining, soothing, justifying, to fill a wound you didn't cause? If so, that's the moment to step back, not to abandon, but to avoid being pulled into a cycle that was never yours to begin with. Stoicism is the path of clarity. It doesn't deny emotions, but it doesn't worship them either. A Stoic sees the difference between emotional reactions and the deeper truths beneath them. And that's why they're not afraid of others' emotions. They just won't let those emotions dictate their decisions. Emotion holds the secrets. Words are too afraid to speak. And when you observe with calm presence, you start seeing things the other person hasn't even seen yet. Like a wound with no name, a need long forgotten, a hunger for something never acknowledged. And those are the things that tell you if someone is truly ready to walk beside you, or still trapped in battles they haven't faced. Up next, our final chapter, a summary of this entire journey through reading others with Stoic eyes, and a quiet reminder, just for you, the one who's awake. You've just walked through a long journey, from listening to a single phrase to noticing the smallest details others never thought you'd observe. From looking at behaviors to tracing them back to the roots of consciousness, from the tremble in someone's voice, the emotions, the reactions, to finally realizing no one can hide who they truly are forever. The only question is, are you clear-minded enough to see it? Or are you still looking at people through the lens of your own hopes? Stoicism doesn't teach you to become suspicious. It doesn't turn you into someone who constantly analyzes. In fact, it teaches the opposite. The Stoic learns to observe in stillness, understand without attachment, see clearly without rushing to judgment, step back without becoming cold. Because the deeper you see into someone, the more you realize everyone carries a crack inside them. Behind every behavior is a story. Behind every burst of anger is something untouched. Behind the act of pretending to be okay lies a belief that's breaking. Behind the cold indifference might be a love too deep that once betrayed them. And yet, Stoicism doesn't ask you to save anyone. You can't rescue someone if they haven't even seen the trap they're in. You can listen, you can understand, you can walk alongside them, but you must never sacrifice your own clarity just to keep a relationship that lacks truth. The more deeply you understand others, the more urgently you must ask, am I forgetting my own boundaries? Not everyone is whole enough to walk beside you, and not everyone deserves to, just because they need you. Some don't want to be understood. They just want to be believed, without question. Some don't want to grow. They just want someone to fill their emptiness. So if you're in a relationship that makes you doubt your own intuition, if you constantly feel tired because you're the one acting more than they are, if you're always the one listening, understanding, being patient, but never truly seen yourself, then pause. Not to hate, not to retaliate, but to ask yourself one simple question: am I losing my clarity just to hold on to a blurry connection? Stoicism doesn't hand you ready-made answers, but it teaches you to return to your inner wisdom, a place where you don't need anyone to confirm what you already know. You just need one thing: to see clearly. Because in the end, you can't control others. You can't force someone to be honest. You can't rewrite their past. But you can choose. Will I keep getting pulled into an emotional storm that isn't mine? Will I keep letting someone replay old patterns with me while I stay silent? Will I be brave enough to let go of a relationship that never really said goodbye? The more you read others clearly, the more you'll realize it's not that they were hiding, it's that you didn't want to see. And the moment you decide to truly look, not only do others become visible, you begin to see yourself more clearly than ever. You see where you once compromised, how you were once manipulated, what you traded away just to keep something, and then you understand. Seeing others is also a way of seeing yourself. If you've stayed until these final moments, I believe this isn't just a video to you anymore. It's been a small journey inward, into your own awakening. You don't need to remember everything I said. You don't need to master all the techniques of observation. You just need to hold on to one truth. In a world full of performances, keeping your eyes honest is a form of strength. You may feel tired because now you see too clearly. You may feel sad because you realize some people weren't who you thought they were. But one day, you'll be grateful because you no longer live in illusions. You dared to see, you dared to accept, and you dared to let go of what no longer belonged. And that is when you've truly entered the Stoic path, not flashy, not superior, just a steady walk through layers of illusion toward the most honest part of who you are. If you're still here, I want to leave you with one final line. Like a quiet promise. You don't need to see everything. Just don't close your eyes to what's already clear. If fate allows, we'll meet again, on a deeper path, in a clearer light, and as a stronger version of who you're meant to be,